Interesting feature, though, that a new dynamic of anti-Europeanness within Britain.
Yeah.
And some Muslims I know are kind of jumping on that as well.
Oh, they are. I heard from many Asian brothers that their fathers voted for Brexit simply because they found too many Eastern Europeans. So too many Bulgarians or Romanians.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had to laugh or cry about this one, that a Pakistani man who probably doesn't know English voted for Brexit because he found too many Romanians and Eastern Europeans.
Come and taking his job.
Hello, would you like to upgrade your tea and coffee providing? Go to East London, Quaker Street Coffee and Bubble Tea. They will provide better tea and coffee providing than your current tea and coffee provider is providing. What about downgrading? If you mention the podcast name, they will downgrade your providing to 10% off. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to today's Unscripted Podcast by Islam21C. I'm your host, Salman Butt. My guest tonight is someone that I've been trying to get on the show for a long time, mashallah. I met him, I think, about a year ago in Sheikh Haytham's house, I think it was, Hafidhullah, when he was kind of recovering from his illness, alhamdulillah. And we hit it off. We discussed a lot of his work. It's none other than Dr. Stef. How do you pronounce your surname?
Stef Keris.
Keris.
That's right.
Right. So unsurprisingly, it's spelled it's pronounced just as it's spelled. I thought it was some kind of. He's a Greek convert, mashallah, from to Islam, and his work is the Islamic history of Europe, mashallah. Now we spoke about a lot of things in that night in Sheikh Haytham's house, and very, very interesting character, alhamdulillah. And I want you to just purely for the sake of Assalamu alaikum, by the way. Okay. Just purely for the sake of this podcast, assume that I'm a complete ignoramus when it comes to history. Obviously, he's just pretending.
Yes.
It's probably better, that way. Otherwise, we can converse on a higher intellectual plane
after
to everyone else.
The recording, yes.
But just assume that I'm a complete ignoramus about history. And to be honest, those people who are, not that well read in history, and on a serious point, I include myself as well. I'm not really consider myself like a history buff or anything. But it doesn't mean that we have zero information or so-called knowledge about history, because we absorb so many things, especially the obvious thing is from history lessons at school, but also from films, from popular culture, from novels or whatever that we just kind of absorb from our culture around us about history and historical kind of events and what we give importance to and not. And when it comes to Islam and Europe in particular, a lot of us, including myself, the broader discourse and narratives about Islam and Europe is completely two different kind of spheres. And about 60 years ago, a bunch of Muslims came, and that's when Islam, came into Europe. That's the kind of received wisdom.
Absolutely, that's a general idea.
That's the general idea that we kind of absorb. Yeah. What's wrong with that idea?
Well, very wrong, because the idea. There's a narrative that has been built up the last couple of decades in order to make it seem that it's something strange. It's something that came from outside.
Yeah,
Islam
something
was
exotic.
Well, exotic would be even positive. It's actually quite negative, right? But it started already actually at the very beginning of Islam coming to Europe at 711 when Tariq bin Ziyad arrived in Gibraltar. The Spaniards, or the indigenous people, Christians, called them not Muslims, they called them Moros. And the word itself is a Greek word, and it means black. So that means Africans. That means people who don't belong to Europe. Do you see the narrative? So they built up a narrative already in the 8th century when the first Muslims came. So not in the 1960s, but long before. And when they came, it was these African black Muslims against us white Christian Europeans.
Was there a notion of Europe then at the time, though? Because I've read in
You're
places, some kind of historians or maybe critical historians, they say that the identity of Europe as a thing was constructed in opposition to the Islamic.
Charlemagne. If you look at
I
Charlemagne,
read
for
that
example,
the nice quote. Without Muhammad, there would be no Charlemagne.
Oh, Charlemagne,
Sallallahu
that's
alaihi wasallam. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam for Muhammad. Not
For Muhammad,
Charlemagne.
no. There is some truth in it because and we're looking at the 8th century now, 8th, 9th century, and Charlemagne was the opposition of Harun al-Rashid, and actually not only the Abbasid, the Abbasid, and not only, and we should not look at it that they were just fighting and opposing each other, but actually they were even with each other fighting Al-Andalus, which that time was an Umayyad kingdom or empire. And so the Abbasids with Charlemagne against Al-Andalus.
Oh, okay,
and there you see already the problems. And this is something that
disunity.
occurred. The disunity, that's right. And this is something we have to take with us throughout history, that we see how Muslims and the Muslim empires actually fell, all of them. Not only one and two, but all of them. They all fell because of no unity, because of fighting against each other, because of actually including everybody else who was against Islam, Christians and Jews and whoever, taking them with you as friends and then fighting your Muslim brethren.
That was a kind of key characteristic, one of the many characteristics of the Khulafa Rashida period. Khulafa Rashidun, and that the Ummah was by and large united.
By and large,
even though there were kind of different sects and so forth amongst the Muslim Ummah. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh, for example, he had a big fitna with the Khawarij and kind of rebellious groups, but he never kind of expelled them. Because maybe because he knew, radiallahu anh, he was one of the most judicious and intelligent companions. He knew that just kicking them out and they would be free to roam, and he said, you guys stay there in this area, you don't mess with us, we don't mess with you, but obviously it's escalated from there. But they had this notion of it's very important to have the integrity, the structural integrity of the ummah, even including the kind of weird and extreme kind of groups. But when the kingdom started, then it's kind of every dynasty for its own, isn't it?
Pretty true. I mean, from the Umayyads onwards, it was basically the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Fatimids, the Seljuks, the Ottomans, and so on and so on. They all took a dynastical. It was a dynastical change. That was it, and that's why the Rashidun. That's it. That's very clear. However, it did not mean that Islam did not develop. I mean, the Muslims did not develop or took development on. I mean, in the contrary, actually, many of them, especially the Umayyads, took development over to Europe. Agricultural technology. At that time, they were much more advanced technologically than the Christians were. And with regards to the notion of Europe, you're absolutely right. I mean, at that time, 7th, 8th, 9th century, there was no Europe. There were not even countries. There were no nations. The first European nation as a nation, with the idea of more or less what we have an idea of a nation, was Portugal. And
the first
real European Christian united nation, which would say, okay, we consider ourselves being a nation, not really in our understanding of the 21st century, of course not, because that came after 1789, the French Revolution. But the Portuguese were one of the first ones to become independent, getting rid of the Muslims, becoming a nation, a country, Christian nation.
With borders, with a
Spain.
Consistent kind of identity amongst themselves, and notion of citizen.
Having the same language, having the same history, having the same background. And these people had to go somewhere because Spain was still Islamic at that time, so they couldn't go towards Europe, so they had to go away from Europe. Where did they go to? The Americas, obviously. Brazil, South America, the Caribbean, Africa. And that's how basically the Muslims in Europe, in Al-Andalus, pushed the Portuguese towards becoming colonialists. If you want to look at it that way, that's quite interesting.
Sorry, on behalf of for what it's worth. Sorry, if you're suffering from the legacy of all that trauma. So let's kind of rewind a bit. So Charlemagne, you mentioned, he had a kind of pact or a rivalry with Harun Rashid, Abbasid Caliph, against
Al-Andalus.
I mean, Andalus, it's like known now. I mean, there's like tourism. There's South Spain is like even I've been to Alhambra, and I found. I mean, I really don't enjoy like historical kind of relics and stuff. I like to go, see natural beauty and stuff. But even I've been. So that means something. It's some. It's kind of well known now. It's cool.
But you must have been
to
amazed
know
by
about.
what you saw in Granada. I can imagine Alhambra.
Yeah, it's beautiful
It
stuff.
is
Yeah.
amazing, isn't it?
But to be honest, it reminded me of Company Bagh in Faisalabad, Pakistan, for some reason. Shout out to everyone in town.
Okay, interesting. Al-Andalus reminds you of Pakistan. But there is, look. I mean, I was surprised when I was, the first mosque in Greece, in nowadays Greece, was in the time of Sultan Bayezid. That was in the 13th, 14th century. And that time, if you look at that mosque, that masjid reminds you of an Andalusian mosque, somewhere in Cordoba. I was very surprised. And these were
Greece.
Ottomans, in Greece, yes, Ottomans. So that really, there you can see that, of course, there's a connection. The Muslims are interconnected, were and are interconnected somehow, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, actually. Whatever you are, there is an Islamic culture. So there's no Pakistani culture only. This developed later. There's no Turkish culture. There is no Arabic culture, but it's an Islamic culture, which is a good thing, I think, personally.
In terms of the architecture and stuff.
In terms of the architecture, in terms of culture, development of, language, for example, the way we use language as Muslims. It doesn't matter if you're Greek, Italian, Turkish, you still will say Inshallah, and you still will say Alhamdulillah, you say Salaam Alaikum, which is amazing, I find. And this is something that I think non-Muslims are jealous about.
Yeah.
They would like to have something like this. There's something that is a commonality we all have in the world, and which is great. But yeah, to rewind again what you said before,
I think, sorry to
further.
cut you off, just reminded me that I think it's Professor Salman Sayyid. He likens the Islamic kind of, I'm probably going to butcher his ideas now, but as I recall, Islam and the Islamic kind of culture as a language, where, for example, you put a Muslim anywhere in the Islamic world, like take him from East London to Malaysia somewhere, and they'll know roughly what to do when time of Jum'ah comes. They roughly know that it's normal to be served this, and a bacon sandwich or whatever would be completely out of the menu, literally. That kind of stuff. So there is a shared kind of
identity.
Huge shared identity and a language and what's considered norms
I think norms rather than language. I mean, if you're now in Turkey, obviously, and you speak Arabic, they will all look at you like.
I think you do it as like a metaphor of a language.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, yes, a shared culture, a shared identity. Yes, rather, it is there. It is there. I really believe there is a kind of ummah feeling. If you want to find it, you can find it. From Morocco all the way to Indonesia, you will be able to find something, and it is really amazing. I was in the Gambia 2 years ago. And West Africa, and it was the first time in West Africa at that time, and I really felt surprised how I knew I was in Africa, but the Islamic element was so strong there, although you also found a very strong African non-Islamic element there, although 95% Muslims, but you knew that they knew the norms and the values, and they knew what was happening. The adhan was there, you could hear it, you could see people going to the masjid, you could see people taking a break. You could see, amazing. I mean, there is something like a common culture.
And this is even though you're a convert to Islam, isn't it? It's not like you were born and you were raised as a child like this.
That's right.
To absorb this.
That's right.
When did you become Muslim?
I became Muslim when I was around 19, 20. Well, it's very difficult, actually, the question, because I started getting interested when I was 15. And that all started with my interest in history. I was always interested in history since I was actually in primary school. And I was going to Greek school in Germany. I grew up in Germany. And I was going to Greek school there. Sorry? Guten Tag, guten Morgen, yeah. Okay. No, you got me.
Wie heißt du?
Yeah, Stefanos, yeah. Mashallah. Your German is very good.
Ich bin ein Berlinger.
Ich bin ein Berlinger.
That's the one thing I remember from history, GCSE history club.
Ich bin ein Hamburger.
Doner kebab.
Anyway, I have to laugh. Döner. In this country, people believe that döner is German.
Really?
Right? People believe in this country that döner is something German. But it's actually Turkish. And the Turks imported it into Germany and exported it from Germany to the rest of the world.
You have
it's like pizza.
German doner kebab here.
That's right. You have the chain of German doner kebab, exactly, which is actually not German. It's Turkish.
We're not sponsored in the traditional sense by any doner providing companies, but if you are, you do get in touch if you're interested. They fuel a lot of our activities in Islam Trinity.
Before we start, right? Anyway, no, yeah. Just
So
to
you
come
were
back to-
raised
but
in
they-
a
I was
Greek
raised,
school.
I was raised in a Greek school in Germany, and that time.
So you know
it
all
was-
the Greek culture and all. You guys do this as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
the
we
one
do.
common thing with Muslims, I suppose. A lot of Arabs do a lot of
They
this.
do. That's true. That's true. There's a lot of commonality. Again
They have
between
a
Arabs
plant, I think, when you cook it, it goes like that. They call it the sabr or something.
the plant, yeah.
Yeah, when you cook
Okay.
the leaves turn out that, and they call it
Sabr.
sabr.
Good, mashallah.
Yeah.
No, it is, but it's a very Arab thing. The Greeks
Yeah.
do that. The Italians do it very strong. Actually,
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say the Italians more than the Greeks. Actually. Yeah, come on, you take me away. I want to discuss something.
So you used
Greek
to be
school.
a Greek, but then you became Muslim.
Right. Yeah, I used to be Greek, became Muslim. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, you laugh. That's how people think. Greeks look at it that way. It's like when he was Greek, he was a good guy, and then he became a Turk. He became a Muslim. He became a Turk.
Yeah,
That's
the Turk is like the quintessential enemy of the white Western man, isn't it?
well, yeah. The last
Somehow.
caliphate. Don't forget that the last
Yeah.
caliphate in the world was the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
They the Turkish people who came after the Ottoman Empire in 1923 when Turkey was established, they are basically the inheritance of the Ottoman Empire. So yeah, and for
Even
the
as
Greeks,
far as England, I mean,
yes.
There's a famous football chant. I'd rather be a Paki than a Turk.
Really.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
kind
that's
of from the 80s, I think. But I
Okay.
mean, we grew up hearing it. But a lot of Pakistanis thought, yeah, but no, just means that they dislike you less than the Turks.
My God, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I know that they used to call people, English people, who were
Yeah.
quite a lot, by the way, in North Africa, and you can read it in my book, by the way, in the textbook that I wrote recently. North Africa, especially Algeria, used to have a lot of reverts, converts, reverts, Europeans, and amongst them there were a lot of English people. And there was
How did English people end up in...
what
What era are you talking about here?
we're talking about the 14th, 15th century. Okay.
CE.
Yes, of course, you're talking about, Gregorian times. And you will find a lot of English people there. Somebody who would basically, where did I read this again? That there used to be so many English people there that you would hear, English was very common, French was very common. You would have a lot of European people who would, that time the language of the world was French. So you would have a lot of converts, rather Muslim Europeans in North Africa than Europeans in North America at the time. So North America was still developing, right?
Yeah.
And so
Developing.
Yeah. They were busy killing, actually.
Busy
They were-
being discovered.
exactly. That's true. Yeah. So in North Africa, would have a lot of reverts, especially in Algeria, a lot of European reverts, and that had an influence on Islam development also in Europe.
Did
and
they
in the
take
Mediterranean
it
Sea.
back home too?
Sorry, say
So these English reverts, did they take this any elements of Islam back home, or
Well,
they
that
just kind of
started.
lived?
Look, imagine that Crusaders. During Crusaders' time, when the first Crusaders came, for example, in the Middle East, many of them came from the English-speaking world. And when they went down to the Middle East, one strange thing that happened to them was they started washing.
Yeah.
So when they came back to Europe
It's a
and
waste
brought
of
this,
water, isn't it?
the habit, but
bad
they
habits,
had
right?
enough here, right? They had more here than there. So when they came back and they started washing themselves before food or after food or something, that raised a little bit eyebrows, because people were like,
Then you've been
"Do you take some
radicalized."
kind of Muslim, the Muslim ideology with you when you come back to Europe? Don't forget you're in Europe, right? You will not believe, but
British
that time,
values, British
values. When the Normans reconquered Sicily, which was Muslim, Islamic, and when the Normans took Sicily, conquered Sicily, the church would look into everybody living in Sicily who would claim not to be Muslim, look into if they wash themselves too often, then that's suspicious around them. Right? And when the Ramadan came, obviously they would make sure that nobody would fast. So everywhere in Spain and Italy, you would find in shops, you would find special invitations to eat and to drink. And if you don't do that, if you don't eat, you don't drink, you become suspicious, right? So again, European values most probably, And one important thing, by the way, don't forget that when a certain Indian came over to Britain in the 19th century, Victorian times, he was declared by the king the shampooing surgeon of Her Majesty, His Majesty at the time, because he brought over soap from India. So he
Sabun.
opened a hammam, right? And that was something amazing that time, because they would not wash and they would not even know how to use it. Well, they wouldn't know soap
Yeah.
in this part of the world, which was, they had an empire at that time. 3/4 of the world actually belonged to the British Empire. And I find this amazing, these facts, right?
I always think that because I remember in A-levels I took this course called Science for Public Understanding, SPEW for short.
Okay.
Nobody wanted to be in that class except me.
You're the only one.
And everyone was forced because everything else was full up. But I was really interested in that. And I still remember to this day, it was 1857, something like this, Ignaz Semmelweis in Austria-Hungary or something. He discovered that washing your hands is something good.
Amazing. Oh, mashallah.
I was like, mashallah, bro. He was like, all of these women keep dying of childbed fever, and we don't know why. And, he just kind of, out of curiosity, asked the medical students and stuff, when you're handling dead bodies and stuff, maybe you should wash your hands before delivering babies. And lo and behold, they stopped dying. And they were like, you know what? This washing your hands stuff is pretty... we look at what we discovered. Let's export this to the rest of the world. And everyone else is like, yeah, okay, bro. Soundcloud guys, sorry to butt in, but if you're enjoying this podcast, please head over to islam21c.com/donate to help us make more. And if you're not enjoying it, head over anyway and help us make better ones.
I did an experiment for myself. I was working at a college in Birmingham. And I decided, once I went to the bathroom and I was washing my hands, and I saw people going in, coming out, leaving the bathroom without having washed their hands.
So annoying.
So I was like, what? So I just stayed there, just for fun, 5 minutes. It was a break of 2 hours, I think. I had no lesson. So I saw a girl coming in, I remember that specifically, and she went to the bathroom, and I was like, okay, let's
You're
wait.
in the ladies' bathroom.
No. I was in,
Okay.
what happened? Let me explain.
Were you that professor who got fired?
Let me explain what happened. Let me explain. The bathroom was divided. Basically, the main hall was
the
where
hand washing part was
exactly, and
Okay.
then the girls there.
Good save.
Ooh. All right. So again.
Start again.
So I saw the girl coming in, going to the toilet, coming back, and just passing me. That means she did not wash her hands. So I was like, wait, can this be that? And I don't know if I should say that publicly, but both of them were white British.
Yeah.
Now I waited
Even
a
though
bit.
you're in Birmingham,
Yes. Yes, the minority was there.
endangered species.
I decided to stay a bit longer and to see if really, is it something that I just experienced the moment, or is it something that's
do
happening?
some science.
Kind of, yes, for myself. And I did experience, indeed, I was there for 45 minutes the first time and for 55 the second. And I experienced...
If you're just joining us after the break, Dr. Stef Keris is just talking about how he was spend hours in the Birmingham college
bathrooms, right?
Monitoring how many white
scientific-
people wash their hands.
For scientific purpose,
For scientific
purpose, right? For science. Now, they would come, and indeed, it was mainly white people, honestly, coming in, going to do their things, coming out, and not washing their hands.
But did you see, like...
I don't know what they were doing on the toilet.
You'd have to see a control of non-white people and...
Well, I did. Yes, there were enough non-white
Asians,
people.
Africans.
There were enough Asians, enough African people, enough Caribbean people who would come in and leave the bathroom after having washed their hands, and that was actually the majority.
Yeah.
You can clearly say. I mean, I don't know how scientific that was. For 45 minutes the one, 55 minutes the other. But for myself, it was a kind of confirmation that unfortunately in Europe, hygiene was not. It's something very new.
Yeah.
The last 100 years, I would say. Even that one, not after World War II.
It's one of the benefits of immigration.
Well, yeah, most probably like food as well and all this stuff. Yes.
But so you started off by saying Islam isn't something new. So then you're talking about the some of the relics or effects of Islam came to the British Isles, for example, as early as just after the Crusades. Yeah, in terms of soldiers, kind of crusaders washing their hands or learning some hygiene habits and stuff. What else? What other kinds of early influences of Islam in
Have
Europe?
you ever heard of King Offa?
Oh, yes.
King Offa, the Anglo-Saxon king, tell me.
Yes. Adnan Rashid He's like a historian as well, mashallah,
Okay.
and he's a collector of coins.
Okay.
He showed me a picture of the first gold coin. See,
There you go. Remember that.
I'm not a complete jahil, yeah, but just assume I am. Adranashi, he showed the first gold coin that was minted in what is now known as the British Isles. Said Muhammadun Rasulullah on it.
It said actually,
and when you turn it upside down,
King Offer
King
X,
Offer,
in Latin, and on the other side it says La ilaha illallah. Okay. Subhanallah, this is amazing,
Yeah.
isn't it? And it was minted here, okay, the British Isles, as you said. the
So
first
it could
one.
get kind of purchasing power globally because it would resemble the coinage of
Well, of Al-Andalus,
Khilafah.
yeah, that time of the Khilafah. Yeah. It was. We don't know exactly what. I mean, that is another question. Exactly why some people say
As
okay
opposed
straight away.
to he was convinced in that the truth of that statement. or-
Well, yeah, some Muslims nowadays they need to have this most
Yeah.
probably. They need to jump on it straight away. Oh, look, he was a Muslim or something.
Yeah.
Hard to believe that. One thing. On the other thing, we don't have the we don't have the proof for it, but we don't have the proof against it either.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't really say that he was not. But we know one thing. That was the time we're talking about the 8th century, the time of the peak of Islamic civilization, and not only in the Muslim world, but also in the Muslim European world, in Al-Andalus. That time we're talking. And Al-Andalus, by the way, just to make this clear, because many people don't know that. And you said before. We know now Al-Andalus, we know what it is. And somebody told me that recently on the phone, I was like, listen, I don't want you to tell us about Al-Andalus, we know everything about Al-Andalus. Now, let's talk about the Ottomans, let's talk about Ertugrul. I said, bro, if I started telling you 5 minutes...
Yeah, wrong one.
There we go. Ertugrul. Let's talk about Ertugrul. I said, okay, I understand why you want to talk about Ertugrul. That's fashion, that's great.
Yeah.
However, Al-Andalus, if I asked you now, what is Al-Andalus? You tell me, what is Al-Andalus, Salman?
I would say South Spain.
You would say South Spain even.
Yeah.
That's even the worst answer ever.
Andalusia.
The worst answer ever.
I'm just pretending, by the way. I'm in character here. I know
acting, right?
Andalus is a period of time. It's not a
It's
geographical region.
It's two. It is a geographical region
Heard
as
you
well
say
as
that
it is
on
a chronological period. So basically, 711 is when Tariq bin Ziyad arrived in Gibraltar. That's why it's called Gibraltar.
That's why a lot of Muslims have convenience stores.
In Gibraltar.
7-Eleven.
Oh, sorry. Okay, all right.
It's one for
Let
the
me go on,
American
yeah.
brothers and sisters here. We used to have that here, but I don't know what.
So 711, Tariq bin Ziyad arrives in Gibraltar. Okay.
I knew that.
And Gibraltar Tariq, that's why it's the name Gibraltar,
Gibraltar.
right? The rock or
What
the hill
a
of Tariq.
coincidence.
Mhm. And from there on until 1492, Islam was established not only in what they called Al-Andalus, Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, but also going into France, Italy, Sicily, the island of Crete in Greece, Cyprus, and, believe it or not, a country which is not far from France, a neighbor of France, Switzerland. Switzerland was actually part of Al-Andalus, and not Al-Andalus as we know it geographically, as we said, Spain and Portugal, but chronologically, within the period of time that Al-Andalus was Al-Andalus in Spain and Portugal, during that time, Switzerland was also open to Islam. And I clearly use the verb open because I don't want to call
Not
it conquer
conquered
and
or-
conquest, absolutely not, because the idea of conquest is straight away bloody and killing and raping women and so on. That's
But
what
you
comes
use the
from-
word empire as well, I noticed. Is that something that you're
I do, yes,
okay
because
with
there are
as a term? Or
yeah,
Some people say it wasn't an empire, it was a sultanate, technically.
a caliphate, a sultanate, yes.
Yeah, I don't know
okay.
what the difference is, but
Well,
as a historian, do you have any issues with referring to, because empire as well, you think of imperialism.
yeah, but that
Think
came
of
later.
colonization.
Sure, but that came later. And it's true. It has been destroyed. Many things,
So-
many words have been
So
destroyed.
what you're
because
saying is Europeans kind of ruined imperialism
Europeans ruined a
by-
lot of things,
by
actually.
doing it so such an evil way.
Yeah,
It's
well,
a nice kind of empire.
they ruined the world. Europeans just they even ruined Europe. Actually, at this moment, I mean, it's
How come you saying they?
although myself I'm European,
Yeah.
right? Okay. With they, I mean the us and them narrative again. Now we're creating an us and narrative again.
You
And we
got
shouldn't-
quite easy way out now. Saying like for all the good
You
stuff,
got me there. You got
I'll
me there.
say we do this and that.
You know,
for
I
the
had-
bad stuff, I was like,
Okay,
I became
once
Muslim.
I was on the phone with a brother, Pakistani brother,
Yeah.
and I said, bro, these white people, I said, you know what they did to me? And it was like, bro, you're white, you know that, right? I said, you know what I
Not
mean with
anymore,
white
though.
people?
When you
When I
become
become
Muslim,
Muslim-
you kind of occupy a different race, kind of between white and.
No, but the truth is what we mean, what I personally mean when I talk about Europeans. Of course, I'm a European. I'm a double European. However,
What does that mean?
What does that mean? I'm Greek, grown up in Germany. I have both nationalities, both passports. My children are even triple Europeans. You know, my wife is Dutch, so they also inherited the Dutch
Mashallah.
nationality. But what I mean with that, and we are very European actually, but European in a way of the general understanding. Now, I don't want to hit myself or kick myself with that because Islam is
Not like
also part
anyone's
of
recording
Europe,
this.
right? Yeah, exactly. Good that nobody's listening. It's just between us two, right? So Europe is obviously a continent where the majority of people have a type of European identity and culture, which has something in common with Christianity.
Yeah.
However, we have 4 countries, minimum 4, maybe even 5 Muslim countries in Europe, and they're all on the Balkan Peninsula. Okay, from Bosnia down to Turkey. So if we look
So
at
let
them,
me Bosnia, Montenegro.
Montenegro is not a Muslim country,
Okay, I've
but
just
Bosnia, you're right, yeah.
more
than 60%
North
Muslims.
Macedonia.
That's the 5th one
Yeah.
we could mention as 5th one. We could,
Kosovo,
Kosovo,
Albania,
and
saying it properly. What
Turkey,
was it?
obviously. The
And
biggest
Turkey.
one. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, these 5
I was
countries.
in Turkey, as you know. I just got back today,
Oh, mashallah.
doing some research for this podcast.
Okay, mashallah.
So let's talk about Turkey a bit.
So you came ready full of energy.
So we
right?
saw a nice poster there saying some countries are too big for one continent. That's a nice advertisement for Turkey because it's kind of
Did you
stretches
go to
across.
Istanbul or did you
No,
Alanya,
we're just
Antalya?
chilling out on the
Okay.
southern coast, nowhere near Syria. Don't worry.
Good weather?
Change the subject. Actually, I went from 27 degrees to 7 degrees today.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
obviously. It was
I mean, it's-
27,
yeah, it was
mashallah.
really nice
Great,
day,
man.
mashallah.
Mashallah.
Even though it was November.
I don't see a tent. What's happening? Where did you?
Yeah,
Were you
I
hiding? or
was.
something?
I don't think brown people tan that well. Just.
So you're considered brown, right?
Yeah.
We
I
have the
think
same
I was.
colour,
I think I
don't know.
did tan a bit. Yeah. Just the lighting here. Maybe it'll take a few weeks to kind of shine through.
Inshallah,
But,
inshallah.
yeah, I mean, Turkey's up and coming.
No,
What was I going
absolutely.
to say about Turkey?
No, we're talking
yeah,
about the
got
5
back
countries.
today.
Yeah, the four Muslim countries. 5th one, if you want to take North Macedonia as well, it's a Muslim majority countries. So look at that. I mean,
I
there is
met
a
a brother
European
from there who's an MP there. MashaAllah.
MP
Yeah, Muslim member of parliament.
in
Not
Turkey.
Amir Puri. I did this joke before. Some people got upset. I don't have anything against Mir Puris. You know what I mean? But it's just,
No comment. No comment. I'm not from that part of the world, you know.
Yeah.
So.
So because Mir Puris call themselves, some of them call themselves MPs as well. So just
Do they?
kind of I don't know, little pun. But he was a member of parliament. I also know a few Bosnian MPs as well.
Okay.
Mashallah, Muslim MPs, and alhamdulillah, they seem to be kind of involved in the political process. There's still a lot of problems, kind of brewing under the surface.
Yeah.
May Allah make it easy for them.
Amen.
But it's good to see young. They're like my age, so young, kind of Muslims going into politics and proud of their Islam. And so
Bosnia is
inshallah,
it's an
upward
example, I think.
trajectory.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
Bosnia is doing quite well, mashallah.
But that's recent. So
Yeah.
going back, you're saying Al-Andalus was not just a geographical kind of area, but a period.
Yeah.
And so many different European countries, what we now regard as European countries.
Right.
Was there a Europe then?
No. There was clearly not the notion of Europe at the time. Nobody would think I'm a European or something. No way. But there was no Spain and Italy and Greece and Germany either. So the nation idea.
Or was it just kind of empty space?
No, you have no. Like for example, if you take Italy, there were city-states such as Venice and Genoa. These were city-states, powerful city-states. Rome was once the Roman Empire. There was no idea of Italy, nothing like that.
Because the narrative that we have today, the powerful narrative is there's something called Europe, and it came from the Greeks, and a bit of Roman interference.
Yeah.
Some of it from the Greeks, some of it from the Romans, the Latin, and all the mixed up with. And suddenly, Jesus, peace be upon him, he enters the scene and he's English,
And they're all
or
Christian.
he's
Yeah,
European.
Yeah, he's European.
There's a
definitely, yes.
Palestinian Jew.
Blonde, blue-eyed, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But somewhere, somehow, there's this Christendom forms, And then very later on, there's this, maybe like since 100 years ago, we have this new construct of Judeo-Christian forming. I think to kind of, some people say to battle the kind of the bubbling anti-Semitism, to include Jews and kind of retrospectively in the history of
After World War II.
Christians, not Christians in general, but there's been a lot of anti-Semitism throughout the 2 millennia of what we now call Europe. But
no, not one.
So that's the narrative that Europe has always been there. It's been a thing. But another narrative which you're kind of suggesting is, and a lot of people suggest that Europe came as a reaction to Al-Andalus, or the European a European identity formed in contradistinction to the Islamic or the Morisco or the Moor.
Look, yes and no. If you go, I mean, that goes pretty far back. We're talking about the 8th century, 9th century, where there was, in Europe was basically like the jungle of the world. There's absolutely nothing happening, especially Western Central Europe. We're not talking about the Byzantine Empire and the Greek Orthodox and so on. This is a different issue. However, Rome didn't exist anymore. I mean, the West Rome didn't exist anymore. When Allah talks in the Quran, Surah Al-Rum, for example, they just refer to East Rome as the Romans, because they were the only Romans there. West Rome didn't exist. The barbarians, as they call them, had taken Rome over already. And this happened several times. Arnold Schwarzenegger came over, right? Exactly. But again, these barbarians were tribes. So Europe was as tribal as Africa is nowadays and has always been. So the idea of, Africa is so tribal and Africans, they cannot live together, they cannot work together. That's how Europe is not very different. And you know what? Look at Spain at the moment. Spain is divided amongst several tribes, actually. Okay, now they might call themselves regions, Catalonia, Castellano, and so on. However, they're actually tribal, very tribal. It's very tribal the way they're thinking. They have a different language. They do not want to deal with the other tribe, and that's how it was throughout Europe the whole time through.
That's how it was throughout all human societies.
Humanity was like this, no doubt, yes. Because we're talking specifically about Europe. So it was not different to the rest of the world. So the idea of nations developed in 1789.
French Revolution. European?
What about Europe?
The notion of a European. That's
even newer.
Before,
it's even newer than the continent, than the nation, than the European continent idea. Europe as a continent is not necessarily very new, but Europe is a continent of more than 50 nations, who now become 27, 28 of them become one European Union nation. That is very new. That is
What's
something.
Eurasia? Eurasia, I remember hearing this or reading this phrase.
That's a geographical term.
Yeah.
That is a term actually referring to Europe and Asia as one entity going on, because Europe and Asia, as you can see, are connected. Russia, for example, considered to be a European country, but the majority of Russia is in Asia. Yeah. Like Turkey is considered to be a European country, but the majority of Turkey, 95% is basically but geographically.
There's a lot of Turkophobia as well.
That's also there. That's
like the Brexit famous breaking point photo.
Tell me which one is that?
Nigel Farage, I don't think Nigel Farage is someone, just saying, there's so many foreigners just waiting to get into Britain. There's always this kind of looming threat that Turkey might join the EU, and then freedom of movement for all those 8 million Turks or whatever come to steal your job. That's kind of pulling on these ancient fears.
It's there. These fears.
The Turk.
Obviously, there's a lot of ignorance going on.
But Eurasia, so was there a period where it was seen as there was less of a this is Europe and this is Asia, and maybe like a because I heard similar about Asia and Africa, that it was before colonialism, before imperialism, kind of East Africa and Asian cultures, they were very similar either side of the sea, and there wasn't a massive kind of focus on seeing them as distinct continents. Because even the continents, somebody came along and drew this map for us, and there's a lot of power in that. This is your continent. Here's where you belong. Here's where she belongs. Here's where he belongs. And that's a European. It feels like a European kind of construct.
Definitely it is. I mean,
Imperial construct.
It is an imperial. I mean, nowadays Africa, Asia, the Americas, everything, whatever. Australia. It is clearly a European construct, without a doubt, and it is a very artificial one, as we said before. I mean, if you have countries such as Nigeria with more than 400 languages. 400 languages. Wow. That is, and by the way, India is not far behind. It's very close to that. So that's supposed to be one country. One country, so many languages, and more different cultures and religions and ethnicities and God knows whatever, which is not a bad thing. But it becomes a bad thing if you put in this nation idea, this idea of one nation, one people, one language, one culture, one color, one everything. No diversity. But now they're trying to tell us basically that, we believe in diversity, we believe in, they're trying to tell a Muslim, although all Muslim empires were actually multicultural from the beginning to the end, actually, from the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam up to actually the last, or the Ottoman Empire. There are black Turks nowadays in Istanbul because of the Ottoman Empire, if you want to know. So the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans had black people, Asian people amongst them, white people, and so on. So this motion, this idea is really something very European, okay? Very European. And
Just
the idea of
separate
nation is separate. Absolutely. I mean, they're kicking themselves. Sorry?
A product of the French Revolution, you said?
No doubt about it. French Revolution 1789. The idea was basically to get rid of anything that has to do with religion. Yeah. Religion in itself became the enemy. They beheaded priests and clerics that time during the French Revolution. And that was an enemy which until nowadays have to make you understand why it's happening, what's happening in France. The idea in France of the phobia, you can say in France, religiophobia that is happening is really like Islam. Obviously is the most visible religion. So for that reason it becomes an Islamophobia, but actually there's a religiophobia going on in France, and this for more than 200 years. And
I think I've got some theories about that myself, because when some kind of thinkers they describe secularism per se as just the latest iteration of Protestant Christianity, in that the kind of standard, the neutral position. Okay, when you have Protestant Christianity or Christendom, you have Catholicism, you have Islam, whatever, this Judaism. For one to exercise total domination is to actually make itself invisible and become the standard neutral position. To say no religion is given any prominence or preference. This, you just, here's the neutral space. And the neutral happens to be our kind of white Western Protestant norms, post-Protestant norms.
So we celebrate Christmas all together, basically. It's a universal thing.
So, for example, hijab. Yeah. So hijab is seen as, and many Muslims fall into this trap as well, in kind of arguing against hijab bans as this is my religious right or whatever. I'm not saying that's wrong, but if you look at the broader narrative here, is that hijab is something aberrant, something different from the norm. There's a norm which happens to be the way today or 20 years ago's kind of white Western or French woman in the French context, the white post-Protestant secular woman, she dresses, this is her norm of what's normal to be covered in public, wearing a blouse, a long skirt, whatever. Anything more or less is odd, and it needs to be kind of marked as something different.
But how does it fit then with, my grandmother was still wearing hijab in Greece.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And you have old people in Italy, still nowadays, they're wearing black clothes. They will look more Muslim than our Muslim women here, for example. So
and that's why I said, for example, in France, maybe 100 years ago, that was the norm for women. But what's considered the norm now for a woman to wear, the Muslim women's dress isn't taken into consideration of making that norm in the first place. So, for example, a Muslim woman saying, let me wear this because it's my religious right, it's like a French woman being taken into some jungle somewhere where the norm is to be topless. And she's not going to say, this is my right as a Christian to wear this blouse. She's going to say, this is just what I normally cover. Yeah, it happens to be, fair enough, my Christian heritage, whatever, it's cold in France, and just this is our norm to, wear tops and stuff. Likewise, the Muslim woman, she shouldn't be expected to justify because of religious X, Y, Z, I want to wear. This is my norm. This is what I consider normal. Every people has a norm to be of what is considered clothed and nakedness in public. Even for men wearing shorts, wearing whatever, what's normal. I could wear a string vest right now. Thankfully I'm not. But that's not our norm, and it happens to be our norm is built primarily because of many Islamic kind of values and so forth. But we shouldn't be able to, I think, argue. That's my issue with the kind of secularist paradigm and the language, that there is a norm which is the neutral space, and anything extra, anything is necessarily religious. So we shouldn't. I don't think we should argue that this is my religious right. We should just say, this is what I want to wear. Who are you to,
because the question
force your norms as the neutral that everyone is compared to.
You mentioned there were several times neutral. What does it mean? Neutrality, very difficult thing, especially since I've been to Switzerland several times. The country of neutrality, they claim to be neutral. What does that mean? They still haven't explained it to me. They cannot explain it, because you're never neutral. If there's three people, two are arguing and you're the third person, and you're just keeping quiet, does this make you neutral? You do have a position, and you will take A's or B's position, but you will just not utter it. That's all it is. So neutrality is just simply keeping quiet, but not necessarily not uttering your opinion. That's all it means. And that's what Switzerland did it nicely during the Second World War. They just closed their doors and said, no Jews come inside anymore. We are neutral. We don't want to participate in the war. Hello, you are in the middle of the war. You are participating, wanting it or not, you are there. So you cannot just say, I don't want to participate. That is just, you're not 5 years old. I don't want to do that. So, but you are there, and you are part of it. So you cannot just keep yourself out with closing the doors and say we are neutral. And that's what they've been trying to do ever since. And the same nowadays. Germany says, for example, German supermarkets are known in general, also in Germany, they do not sell halal meat. Have you realized Lidl in the UK does not sell halal meat? Really? They don't sell halal meat. Whereas Tesco, Asda, and so on, they all make money on the Muslims, which is no problem. No problem at all, because they do have halal meat. But the Germans say we are neutral. So what they mean with that is we don't sell halal meat, so we discriminate against Muslims. That's not neutral. So,
and that's the real power. Assalamualaikum guys, me again, reminding you to head over to islam21c.com/donate to keep the lights on Islam 21c. We pride ourselves on being independent and being funded by the grassroots community. Too many flies in here. Mosquitoes. Actually, what's the history behind mosquitoes?
No, don't do that.
Because I got one of those things that you shouldn't use the word mosque because it's...
Oh my God.
Is that BS?
There is no, I think it is. Honestly, I think it is. I came across it, but I couldn't find any evidence for what they're saying. There are some people who have a problem with using the term mosque as a mosque, because they say it comes from mosquitoes and we have to kill them and all this nonsense. I don't know where they have it from. It's the same like the tie. I also tried to find out. It was said the tie comes from the Crusaders. Yes, but there is again no proof for that. Do you see a cross in it? I just see.
But when you go like that,
well, you go like that, yes.
But then wait a minute, your whole body makes a cross.
So I don't know. I think that's what Muslims are looking into nowadays. You see, that's why it's so far behind, because when the Muslims were not looking into something like this, pitiful things like that, they were far advanced. The technology was far advanced.
Speaking of crosses, I saw a cross on Uber drivers. I was in an Uber today from the airport. Yeah. And there was a cross in the guy's mirror hanging. And I was thinking, he's an Indian guy. And I was thinking, should I give him some dawah? I felt guilty, because I'm really like the worst da'i. I have zero compassion for anyone. And this is very bad. I mean,
So how would you have started it if you had done it then?
So I actually tried to speak to him.
Okay.
And he's like mentioning, somebody died on the M4. And I was like, oh, yeah, when it's your time to go, it's time to go. Yeah. And then, you have a cross in your mirror. Are you a Christian? He goes, no, I'm a Hindu.
But he had a cross there. Okay.
So when you go across it, he goes, this cross, it stops the police from stopping me and giving me a hard time.
You're not serious, are you?
Yeah, that's what he said.
This is
Yeah,
absolutely...
I was like, that's very interesting.
Okay.
Police.
Okay, that is indeed interesting, yeah.
So I didn't have anything to say. I was like, okay, thanks for the ride. Bye.
Wow, okay,
I need
that's
to
interesting.
brush up on my Dawah skills. Do some I-era Dawah training or something.
Yeah, we could actually. I'm
Yeah.
going to be in Iran 2 weeks, inshallah,
Really?
so maybe you can join me
Okay.
on Sunday, this
Mashallah.
Sunday and Monday, inshallah. So
Okay.
join us, inshallah. Why not?
Will
Yeah.
do. What were we talking about? Right. Yeah. So there are competing kind of notions of Europeanness, right? And the dominant narrative has some obviously vested interests in it by presenting a Europe as, contrary to Islam. And many people have said that Islam has been a useful kind of placeholder to project any insecurities of Europe onto that demon, that other. Now when you have Muslims, or when you have people like yourself who's talking about, wait a second, Muslims have been in Europe since before there was a Europe, a coherent idea of a Europe.
Yep.
What are you talking about? This
Yep.
doesn't make sense, this narrative. You become a threat to that system now.
True. True.
But Muslims, we need to also kind of step up a gear and push forward these alternative narratives that aren't based on the kind of Eurocentrism or white supremacy, that kind
This can just happen when we're educated.
Yeah.
And look now, I mean, if you look at the political spectrum now, this country now, I mean, shortly before election time, we see now the UKIP is coming, right? We see the Brexit party, which is now Brexit.
That's quite the segue, mashallah.
Right, yes. So now you see basically.
I see what you did there.
You see.
Election season. Election season. I think UKIP has disbanded, is turned into the Brexit party, which means the abbreviation for the United Kingdom Islamic Party is available now. If anyone's interested in funding a fleggling party, I don't mind being the leader, whatever.
No, but look what's happening now. I mean, how Nigel Farage is playing it now. From UKIP to Brexit, and the main. What is the party's idea? Brexit is all what it's about. It's all that counts. All what we discuss. But what about the NHS? What about so many things that this country has more issues and more serious issues than Brexit? To be very honest, and this just came
interesting feature though, that a new dynamic of anti-Europeanness within Britain.
Yeah,
and some Muslims I know are kind of jumping on that as well.
Oh, they are. I mean, many. I heard from many Asian brothers that their fathers voted for Brexit simply because they found too many Eastern Europeans. So too many Bulgarians or Romanians. I don't know if I had to laugh or cry about this one, that a Pakistani man who probably doesn't know English voted for Brexit because he found too many Romanians and Eastern Europeans.
Come taking his job.
I don't know. Most probably, I don't know if it's to laugh or to cry, but that shows you nowadays the level of people. The level of people is extremely low.
There is a serious kind of concern though that the problems of Europe, in terms of Islamophobia, the rising far right. Maybe some people argued, I know, that having a break from Europe would shield somehow Muslims from that kind of trend. But the problem is those arguing for Brexit are the ones more likely to be Islamophobic in many cases. So it kind of breaks down there.
I don't know why. I wonder if you ask them, I mean, what did they expect? What did they think that Brexit would, or what do they think that Brexit is going to do for them? We're going to have a country on its own, not as powerful as it used to be. We need to know that. And after so many decades of being part of a family, you're leaving this family. You have 3 million of Europeans in your country who feel anxiety, honestly. Like, we don't know what to do. I mean,
and we got the settlement status 67 million Europeans as well.
Sorry, 67 million Europeans?
Yeah, because Brits are Europeans.
That's what I mean. Yeah, 67 million leave, basically, exactly. And the economy, obviously, the second biggest one in Europe.
It's going to be very difficult. It's like, kind of, they say, removing the eggs from a cake.
True. It is a good analogy, I think. Absolutely. But, it is a problem.
We had Mend on the podcast a few weeks ago, talking about the power of the Muslim vote. And to be honest, it's quite encouraging to see Muslims taking more of a kind of a proactive political role in political life. And I think that is goes hand in hand with the education that you're doing in making Muslims feel that you're not out of place here. You're not a foreigner in Europe.
Absolutely.
You know, Muslims were integral to the formation of Europe, even if it is as the other, as the bogeyman.
True,
you know, true. I heard one person say, I think, you know, whiteness and white supremacy, it always relies on an other to define the boundary. You know,
you need the enemy basically to define yourself.
So even at that level, you know, I mean, that's one of the kind of competing discourses of defining Europeanness. But there's nothing to stop us to say, no, this is a more historically accurate and a more even ethical way to define what a European is. It's a geography. It doesn't have to be kind of tied inextricably to Christendom, to Christianness,
to common
to
culture
whiteness.
necessarily. Yes, whiteness definitely.
It can be a multicultural Europe, but it requires Muslims to, you know, become enfranchised and become empowered and more proactive and involved in political life, in public life, and in education. You know, I remember we visited Professor Tariq Ramadan in France, and he was saying, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but he was talking about the area that we were walking in, and he was saying the Muslims here are the drug dealers. The Muslims, the Asians, the Africans, they're the drug dealers, and they're also the police that are hired to police the drug dealers. And he says the French state, they prefer you just be a drug dealer or criminal or something like that, because it stops you advancing your community's cause. Rather, if you get out of crime and you enter politics, you enter public life, you enter these positions, you can start to really be a threat
to have a voice
absolutely. And your people.
So one of the problems of Muslims feeling othered, Muslims feeling not in place in Europe, is the way history is taught, right? I mean, you must have had some kind of crisis when you mentioned briefly, let's go back to that, about when you were doing research for these books. That's what led you to Islam.
Yeah, history.
So how does that work?
How? Very simple.
Some people, they read the Quran and they like, I want to become Muslim.
Yes.
Some people, they cut a tomato and it
see Allah in there.
It says the word Allah in it. And they're like, Shadu Allah. So how come you were...
It was not something like this. It was not a miracle like this. It was rather the lies that they were telling us. So I realized that the education system, any education system in general, Europe, and especially in Germany, the Greek education system, which I was following. I was living in Germany in my own bubble. At that time it was like this, that the Greek state and the German state, they had common agreements educationally that everybody had their school. So you had, as a Greek in Germany, you had to go to a Greek primary school, finishing primary school and go to a Greek secondary school and then go back to Greece to study at the university. That was the idea. It didn't work. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy about that. It doesn't exist really anymore as a system, but that was the idea. And as a Greek going to a Greek primary school, I, alhamdulillah, had also the influence from outside, from Germans, and I was learning German as a second language, by the way. Although I was Greek in Germany, I did not grow up with the German language, and that's why you can still hear an accent probably when I speak German. Whereas my sister, for example,
like
10 years old. Yeah, you would.
Ich bin ein
Berliner. But my sister, for example, she entered the system 10 years after me. She entered the system 10 years. So her German is more German than my German. My German is Greek accent-wise, so that's so.
You do a bit of this, honey.
I do a bit of this, and I move a little with my hands more, And so no, you can clearly hear it. But the psychology in there, just to make this clear, is also I want to hear it. I want to make them hear it. I want to make sure I'm not German. I grew up like this. This us and them that was there, clearly there with us at that time because of the system.
But when I was going to have some, it must have some positive points to feel a sense of your own belonging, your identity.
Yeah, being Greek. I mean, I was always thinking, okay, Greek primary school, Greek secondary school, Greek university, Greece, back to Greece. Okay, that was.
But the problem is you don't feel at home where you are.
No, because I am not Greek entirely in that way.
You're not going to establish roots there. You're not going to fight for your rights there.
Yeah, well, exactly. You will never do that because you're always thinking back home, going back home, right? back home, the back home mentality, which is the wrong thing. But anyway, this came now with
I'm
Islam,
always thinking
alhamdulillah.
that.
You're always
Back home.
thinking that.
I want to go back home to
What
West
is
London.
back home then? To East London, excellent.
West London, West
Oh,
London.
West London.
I'm always being dragged into East London, and it's terrible for me.
So you're a migrant,
But
actually.
anyway, yeah,
How does it work?
Hijrah back to West London.
The point with,
like
with
that.
education was simply, I saw these people, these teachers lied to us about about history.
This sounds a bit like maybe a conspiracy theory, like they're lying. Would they? The teachers would they say that we're lying?
Our book, look, yes, they would. Because if there is a documentary that was made in 2011 in Greece, a Greek documentary, and several university professors of University of Athens and Thessaloniki, of the two major cities, they came together and they made a great documentary where it's called 1821, which is the revolution, the year of the revolution, of the Greek revolution against the Ottomans. And what they're saying in there are the things that I've been saying for 20, 30 years now. Simply that the Ottomans were not as bad as we were told they were. They did not rape our women as a system systematically. They did not take our children away and made them all janissaries. They didn't.
What's a janissary?
Janissary is somebody who was in the elite army, basically, a special army for the Sultan. So they did not do all these things, what we learned at primary school. And suddenly the whole Greek-speaking world came down on them like a thunder, basically. Like, what are you saying there? What is happening? We learned
So
this.
they said clearly we've been lying.
Yes,
in
yes, they
history
said it.
books.
They said it in that documentary, which I have
It's
at
not
home.
surprising,
actually.
though. I mean, that's what history is.
Well, history is a
his
bunch of
story.
lies, isn't it? His story, right? And wasn't Napoleon who said, actually, history is a bunch of lies that are put together, somehow like this. His quote is, I remember something like this.
Qala.
Something like this. It is basically the victor, Churchill said this, right? The victor writes history.
Okay,
So-
he said they asked him, how do you think history will record you? He said something like favorably, because I intend to write it.
Mashallah.
The
So there you
history
go.
written by the
There you go. You know
victors.
exactly what he was talking about. You know?
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, this idea of these
old
lies
Churchill.
against the Ottoman Empire, about the Ottomans being monsters, bloodthirsty monsters, raping our women, this made me look deeper into this history, look into the Ottoman Empire and see that, hey, other sources, German sources, English sources, French sources, which I learned later as well. So all these languages, that's why languages are very important. All these sources said actually other things. And I know of travelers from that time England, from that time France and so on, who traveled to the Ottoman Empire and came back and said, listen, the Christians there actually have a better life than they have here. So, hello.
They're
Sir
like, I
Thomas
didn't
Wa-
find one harem.
Yeah, well,
That's what I went looking
there
for.
is a very important Englishman, Sir Thomas Walker, who wrote in his books, in his
Someone who
works.
invented the crisps.
Sorry?
Come
Come on, man.
Sir Thomas Walker.
Thomas Walker, yes, I know. Anyway, Sir
I'm a
Thomas
master
Walker,
disarmer, I've been told.
he wrote about how the Christians actually had more rights in the Ottoman Empire than they have in our countries, you know. So we have these things. These things are there. If you want to see it, you see it. If you don't want to see it, don't see it. And that's what happened to me. And I looked into Islam, and I saw that, hey, if they lied to us about the Ottomans, maybe they also lied about the religion, about this Islam thing, which is so bad and terrible. And I looked into Islam, and it took me 3 years, alhamdulillah, until I said Shahada, basically.
Alhamdulillah.
And there was a jihad, an inner struggle, indeed. That was for jihad, right? That was an inner struggle, indeed. And there's sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, and inner struggle, yes. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and say, come on, I'm Greek, I cannot be Muslim.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was fed. I was fed that you're Greek Orthodox, you're Christian, and the opposition party are Muslims. These Turks are the Muslims. But when I found out they're also Arabs,
You need to have that undone.
you need to
unraveled.
have, yes, absolutely. It's like, you know,
That
you have
binary, that false
the
binary
mug,
set up.
it has some water in it. You just, you empty the water and you refill the mug with something different. With the
I always
truth.
say that, you know, you have to absorb or you have to propagate some falsehoods in order for people to stop people naturally coming to Islam. You have to erect barriers in their way. Otherwise, the fitrah, if somebody just comes across Islam with minimal kind of indoctrination previously, they'll be like, yeah, makes sense. Why not? Why should
Well,
God alone? Don't
After
worship
September
statues.
11, most people, most reavers that we know nowadays have come about to be Muslims after September 11, actually. I was one of the only ones I know at this moment who became Muslim before September 11. And I didn't know that many Muslims at that time. I didn't know many European Muslims at that time. But nowadays, mashallah, I mean, you will find anything from Greeks to Italians, everything.
And it's common even from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ to link opposition to Islam in your kind of tribal or ethnic kind of pride.
Very common.
You know,
very, yeah.
We are the descendants of Abdul Muttalib.
Yeah.
We are the legends of Arabia. We will not go against our forefathers and
That's right.
and become, you know, this new race of Islam, of what the Prophet ﷺ is preaching. You know, going against your forefathers, going against your tribe, ethnicity.
Right? Yes, exactly.
How did you get out? So how do you think people can get out of that? You because this is like a kind of key ingredient for da'wah on a wide scale, right?
It is.
To undo some of that binary indoctrination that you can't be Greek and Muslim.
Yeah. You have to get rid of this first. If you still have a little bit of doubt of that, if you have 1% doubt of that inside of you, which tells you, yeah, indeed, you cannot be Greek and Muslim. If you have this, the danger is in your upcoming future life, even in 20, 30, 40 years of practicing Islam, you might fall back to it again because you have this doubt inside of you. If you haven't got rid of it, and that does not mean that you have to turn against your nationality and ethnicity and language and everything, which I did at the beginning. So you have to be careful with that. It's a very thin line.
Some people just adopt a kind of maybe Arab culture.
Arab or Pakistani culture, whatever it might be.
In your case,
yes.
maybe like in that part of the world, a Turk, they'll say the Muslim is equal to Turk.
Yes, that's right. And that's the danger in it, indeed.
You start eating sujuk.
Yeah, you start eating sujuk a lot. You start speaking Arabic or speaking Turkish or something. Yes, and no, it is. There you go. Where is it there? No, it's the other way. So, indeed, it is something that should be a natural thing. Please do not.
Do you think it's good to develop a native Islam for each European kind of subculture?
Islam in itself, look, I mean, we don't have to develop it. It's developing anyway. Look, as a Greek, obviously we have our national dishes. We have our Greek food, which is very close to Turkish food. But then you just cut out the pork, and there you go. You have Turkish meals, basically. That's Greek food. Greek
Apparently
food is
that's the most healthy diet, the Mediterranean
diet, indeed. Yes, indeed. So that's about it, basically. So there's not a lot to change with regards to food. Culture-wise, I mean, look, I know that in Spain, for example, in Spanish, the word ojalá, it's part of the Spanish language, ojalá, which means inshallah.
Oh, okay.
They use it in Spanish. They use it in Portuguese, ojalá. They use exactly the same term.
If you're calling your mother's sister.
Yeah, nos vemos mañana, ojalá.
Ojalá.
No. Nos vemos mañana. We'll see each other tomorrow, inshallah. Nos vemos mañana, ojalá. That's what the Spaniards would say. So in Portuguese, Oxalá, the same thing.
Really?
They have the Allah there. By the way, what does the torero say when the bull comes towards them? What does he say?
The bull or the guy
the bull.
standing?
No, the bull coming towards you.
The bull says,
what does he say? He says, ole, right?
Ole.
What is ole? Yeah. Allah.
No way.
Allah.
That sounds
Allah.
like one of those
conspiracy things, right? No. It is Allah because what it was, it goes back to history when the non-Muslims would hear the Muslims saying, Ya Allah, Allah the whole time, or making du'as with Allah. Yeah. So this became really like a dua. Allah help me. The bull is coming towards me. Imagine now a bull is coming towards you.
I mean, in the Muslim world, when you have a story with a bull, a man, and a big giant knife, the word Allah features pretty prevalent.
No.
In
but
that conversation.
This is
the HMC, especially HMC version.
Yes, that is the total halal version. Yeah. No, we have to be aware of that, and I mean. Of course, there are enough people who would say, like, come on, you come up with these stories. Where do you have them from? Okay, good. Challenge me. What does ole mean then in Spanish? There is no Spanish word ole.
Yeah.
There is no Spanish word ole. What does it mean? Where does it come from Spanish then? If it's not Allah, if it doesn't mean that,
bro.
Yeah, well, there you go. It doesn't, So if you have something, it's the same like in Switzerland, for example. They're saying in Switzerland we have discovered there is more in certain areas in the south of Switzerland. There are surnames that go back to the Muslims of that time. What did the Swiss or the German-speaking people call the Muslims? Saracens. So, have you ever heard of Tilo Sarrazin? Saracen. No. This is a surname. Okay, Tilo Sarrazin lives in Germany. I thought you were going to say
like Khan or Parvez or...
No, actually Saracen. Saracen is...
or Mahmoud.
It's actually Saracen because they used to call the Muslims Saracens. So we have more than 200 Swiss families who
Any
are called,
Uddins?
listen how carefully, man, Saracen, Salacin, Salazar, and so on and so on. So there you go. This is again, you know, you can say, yeah, but where do you have this from? Okay, but explain you to me that.
It's believable, yeah.
Yes.
The relics of, I mean, there's a lot of words as well, like lemon, sugar.
Absolutely, from the Arabic language.
Algebra.
Even today, in the youth culture, the Muslim community youth are so prevalent within that area that you'll hear non-Muslims saying inshallah or wallah.
Oh yeah. They deal a lot with Muslims. Yeah, you hear? Absolutely.
And they might come upon some pagans with their ops and skeng them up.
You know that in the Sicilian dialect in the Sicilian dialect, so the Sicilians also speak Italian, right? But they have a dialect. And in their Sicilian dialect, a poor person in Italian is called povero. But in Sicilian, it's called mischino.
No way.
Hey, what?
Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right? So there you see that the influence, because Sicily was an emirate for 250 years. Okay, it was a Muslim emirate. And the Muslim, meaning the Arabic language influence, is very strong. In Malta, did you know that Maltese is actually an Arabic dialect? Up to 70% of the Maltese language go back to the Arabic language. Grammar, structure, syntax. Up to 70%.
And it's a Christian country, right?
It is a Catholic country, a strong Catholic country. Yes,
so that kind of defeats the myths that you're saying when the Ottoman conquer them.
Malta?
Yeah.
It
Or
was before,
it
actually. It was before, during Al-Andalus.
During
actually.
Al-Andalus. So they didn't like wipe out Christianity. So they
Not at
absorbed
all.
a lot of the language and the other culture, but they still retain their religious
Absolutely,
identity.
but this is one of the major points here. When you say, the Greeks always say, look, we've been 500 years enslaved by the Ottomans, by the Turks. I say, enslaved. 500 years. After 500 years, you would expect that there was no Greek anymore, nobody speaking Greek. But hey, we have a Greek nation of 10 million people now. There's 11 million. How come?
Like African Americans.
Yes.
They have very little remnants
absolutely
of
nothing. Absolutely.
And in fact, I forgot his name. I think Rodney. Maybe I'll put it up on the screen if I remember.
Yeah.
He was charting the remnants of Islamic culture in slaves taken from West Africa, Senegalese.
More than
area.
a third, they say, actually.
And they said a lot of just kind of practices and like you're saying, Ole. They have similar things like in their culture in African American. Some African Americans, like, he mentioned, when a broom goes over your foot, you're supposed to spit or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like it's become a superstitious thing. But what was that before? Because in their culture, like broom, dusting, cleaning, that's where a place of najasa and jinns. They used to read the 3 quls and then
spit. Oh my goodness.
So he said that they forgot the recitation,
right?
But they just remembered the
spitting, which is easier.
He mentioned a lot of things like
my
this.
wife comes from South America originally.
Yeah.
Okay, and this South American
she was
country,
Dutch.
She is Dutch because it was a Dutch colony, Dutch Guyana, which is nowadays called Suriname. And in Suriname, the Muslim influence is even as strong as I remember her mother, who was not Muslim, but of African origin. She would always, with Maghrib time, close the windows and call the children inside. Yeah. And you would say, what is happening? Why are you doing, Mom, why are you doing that? We would say, why are you doing that? He said, it's not a good time. It's the time for the jinns to come out. Basically, they would call them give them another name. And I said, wow. I said, do you see how close your culture, where you have this from? This is Maghrib. And we explained it to her, and she totally understood it. She was actually very open towards Islam. And alhamdulillah, she died upon Islam, by the way. My mother-in-law, alhamdulillah. Proud of that. That's quite good. So this is, mashallah, this is actually amazing if you look at this kind of influence on people far away from the Muslim world. Now, far away from the Muslim world, of course, But this, and I remember so many other things at this moment. I remember how she was doing things also that were very Islamic. Like, Mom, why are you doing this? How come you're doing that? And she would believe anything you would tell her. She would actually, anything Islamic, she would see the logic in it, and she would just accept it,
SubhanAllah.
Yeah,
that's why I was saying, you require a building up of something false to prevent you from coming close to Islam. This is what some people say Jahiliyyah is. Jahiliyyah we talk about it as the era of pre-Islamic ignorance. It's not just ignorance in terms of not knowing something. It's actually something actively false that you've been indoctrinated with, that prevents you from kind of coming
looking into the
close
truth.
to Islam.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
In Surah Fussilat, for example, Allah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقال الذين كفروا لا تسمعوا لهذا القرآن والغوا فيه لعلكم تغلبون. The pagans of Quraysh would say, don't listen to this Quran and make noise during it so that you may become successful, victorious. This was a cause and effect. In order to be successful, you keep your paganism, make noise and
So you don't
distract
listen
people
to it.
from
Yes.
And
That's the fact, you
subhanallah.
basically.
And so you mentioned something about the Ottomans being painted as these kind of savages and colonizers and imperialism and everything negative by some kind of sectors of Greek society, no doubt others European kind of history books as well. But there's an interesting trend now of some Arab countries now also painting or rewriting the history books. I came across some kind of graphic screenshots. I don't know how true that is. I don't know if you've come across this. But rewriting the history books to paint the Ottomans as just reword some bits of as conquerors.
But this is not a
rather
new
than-
thing. This is not something new. Now,
Yeah.
something that's rather happening nowadays is what you're saying is right. But this is something that has been that was going on actually during the time of Arab nationalism, Sadat's time, Pan-Arabism, and so on. Yes, the Ottomans were painted. The Turks, as they called them, as bad as the Greeks, basically, the Europeans. They were even worse for them than the European colonialists. So
Divide and conquer.
absolutely. So no, that was something that was going on. Now, alhamdulillah, due to the Ertugrul series, yes,
You're gonna say that.
we have to say that we just this really. I mean, due to Ertugrul and due to so many people being so interested in Turkish series, even in South America. In South America,
Really?
who they would be really absolutely not like, what is Turkish is something very exotic to them. It's something like Papua New Guinea for us. Yes, like what are you talking?
Dona.
What is something? Yeah, Dona. I mean, not even, they don't know that.
What
So
they
they're
cut it
watching-
sideways.
They were. But they're watching these things.
Yeah.
They're watching Ertugrul nowadays in South America.
Wow.
Can you believe that it has become a success series
Yeah,
down there as
yeah.
well? So that in itself shows, and you see cultural imperialism again. I mean, we have to see that too.
Soft
That is
power.
soft power. That's absolutely. That's totally intelligent.
And I was speaking to one of the actors in Ertugrul, and I was saying, yeah, this is for me. Like this was I only seen this first series because I don't have like a year spare to watch the rest of them. But I saw the first series, me and my wife, and we were like, this is like we've never seen the Muslim be the good guy.
Yes,
and it's
yes,
such
yes.
pure propaganda
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
Muslim crusader thing. We know it's kind of obviously there's a lot of drama and stuff, but just we've never seen that. Usually the Muslim was the bad guy, or the brown person, or the black person is the bad guy. From back in the day when we were growing up. So it's it pumps you up to see that kind of stuff, and it's important to revive some of the sentiment. And I heard it's working in Turkey. It's interesting. It's happening. It's affecting but maybe that's why I think there's a backlash from some of the kind of Arab states that don't want to kind of foster a good relationship with Turkey or want to increase the Arab nationalism in their countries.
Of course, you will have amongst 23 states, you will definitely have enough who will say no, we want to stick to what we are and boycott Turkey and whatever. Of course, there are enough in between who do not support the course that Turkey is going, support other courses. There's no doubt about it. But in general, it has really hit the Arab world. It has hit Pakistan. It has hit India, South America, Africa, where there's no doubt about it. And I mean, if they're in between some 3, 4, 5 countries that go against it, no problem. There are enough others that can actually balance it.
Mahmoud, who is the cameraman / producer / director / biggest Ertugrul fanboy in the world, he's just reminded us that the next part of the Ertugrul series is started of Osman, his son.
Yeah, Osman, really?
Yeah. So they've
okay.
made another spin-off know if it's a spin-off or this was the main thing they were kind of building up to.
Yeah.
Of
Now it becomes interesting.
Osman ibn Ertugrul ibn Suleiman Shah.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. There you go. So I think I would have to
kind
start
of lost
watching it,
track
right?
of time. I wanted to talk about your book because you have a nice, mashallah. It's evolved since the last time I saw it in kind of black and white pages with the ghetto ring binding on it. Mashallah, it looks very nice. It's like a textbook now. Can you describe what this is? This is, it says the Islamic history of Europe, how Islam has become part of Europe.
Yes, basically what we're talking about.
So you spent the last hour saying this didn't happen in the last 60 years.
It happened long
slightly
before
that.
Slightly before that.
Yeah.
Basically,
Full
5
color
chapters.
pages, mashallah.
5 chapters, all of them going into the history of Europe as Al-Andalus, first of all, the Ottoman Empire, the Tatars, which many people don't know.
The Tatars.
The Tatars, they had an influence in Eastern Europe and Northern Europe, actually, especially Finland. The Vikings, you wouldn't say, but Vikings, we found amongst Vikings Muslims. There was a
Viking
Muslims, yes, who accepted Islam. The Vikings had contact with Al-Andalus. They even went all the way down to the Middle East. They were trading with Muslims, and they would come back with a lot of Muslim artifacts.
I
which they
remember
found
finding some people talking about finding Vikings with,
for example, this
like
ring
a
you have
hat
there in
that
front of you.
says something Islamic on it.
This ring you have right in front of you, actually. This ring says Lillah. I think you had it this now. Where is the Vikings over there?
I'm good at flicking pages.
There you go. It says Lillah. Difficult to see on the photo, but it says Lillah, for Allah.
Take your word for it.
So yeah, well, this Viking
Actually, it
ring,
looks like
it was come on, it was found in a tomb of a Viking woman.
Wow.
The question is now: was it a Viking woman who converted to Islam? Was it a Middle Eastern woman coming over to the Vikings? So that's something that people don't know. We are still at the very beginning. I mean, we don't have. That's a problem we have in this world nowadays. In this time and age, we don't have enough Muslim scientists doing this work. And I'm pretty much one of the only Muslim historian, who is looking into this type of topic, actually. And yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done.
the British Isles and Islam.
Yes, there you go. The King Offa's golden coins. Have you ever heard of the belly cotton cross?
No.
The belly cotton cross was found in belly
obviously
cotton.
I have, but just
Okay, yeah, you have to
pretending
print
I'm a
that.
jahil
I
here,
understand,
yeah.
understand. So the belly cotton cross was found in an
Well,
area
what's a
which is
cross?
called
Sorry?
belly cotton. It's a cross. There you go.
Yeah.
Belly cotton in Ireland, and it says Bismillah in there. It says the
Wow.
Basmala in there. Yeah, yeah. And you can see that, by the way, both of them, the coins as well as the belly cotton cross, you can find at the British Museum in London. So you can just take your children there on a Sunday, go to the museum, which is for free. You can just go there to the coin section, and you can find both of these elements.
It's like when you say it's for free, some
Well,
people be like, "Oh, it's so nice of the British Museum to show every other culture's stolen relics and not charge you for it."
That is good, isn't it?
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, so nice of them, mashallah. That's British values for you. Assalamu alaikum guys, last reminder I promise. Head over to islam21c.com/donate to help this movement get to the next level. So we have genuine, high quality media articulating Islam in the 21st century and developing confident Muslims impacting the world for the better.
Yes, of course.
And then if you're gonna another point I was going to mention as well, when you mentioned King Offa,
Yeah.
someone else told me when you're talking about this discussion of the coin and the significance. Some say the significance of the coin being, it's just because of the Muslim period of time they had the coin there, so it was just marketed.
Yeah.
But others said that time that was effectively a person's passport.
Yeah.
So people traveling through Europe,
Yeah.
they would ask you,
Do you have
coins?
Yeah.
And if you had a cross in it, they know you are Christian. And if they had La ilaha illallah or something like that on it, then they knew you are Muslims, and they knew whether you are an enemy or a friend. You know?
Okay.
In that was one thing. And secondly, they said that in Scotland, it's still there today. There's an area called King Offa's Ditches.
Yeah. Dykes.
Dikes.
Yeah.
And they said that phenomena of using that in warfare when they were trying to defend themselves from the north.
Medina.
Came from Battle of Khandaq. And why? Because King Offa had sent to the Emir at the time in Andalus. He said that I need your support to help me defend myself against these northerners who are coming to attack us. And they said we haven't got resources to send you anything now, but what we can send you is an advice, a strategy that was used during the time of Prophet Muhammad from Salman al-Farsi regarding the ditches. That's what they say. I haven't heard this claim anywhere apart
Yes,
from
yes,
the
yes,
fact that someone said it.
You know, one of the reasons why many of these claims are not in this book is because of that reason. I don't want to seem, as you said before, and you're absolutely right. You know, the Queen Victoria was a Muslim and all this nonsense. We're not going to put things like this in.
You had it first, bro.
You know, we're not gonna. I want to be scientifically correct, although many things are most probably true. What you said, what is mentioned, and what people really believe and have heard, there's a lot of truth in it. There's a lot of truth in it.
Interpretations of facts.
I mean, one important point here now is if you look at King John, you know, King Richard's younger brother, King John.
Oh, him.
He sent an emissary in 1213
So he's the
to
one
North
who,
Africa.
Just to contextualize, he's the one who was asked to put forward the Magna Carta.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now he himself, he sent an emissary in 1213 to North Africa, who offered the Emir Muhammad al-Nasir a strategic alliance and would voluntarily give up his kingdom and, quote, abandon the Christian faith which he considered false and to adhere faithfully to the Islam of Muhammad. Furthermore, John offered to support to conquer the remainder of Spain from the King of Aragon. Unfortunately, the Emir declined. Imagine.
Is that legit? That sounds like one of those.
My man, this is very legit. I'm telling you, there is science that can prove this, historical reports that can prove this, no doubt about it. You know?
Wow.
Many things that I can still talk about now and I can mention have no clear and 100% evidence, which I haven't put in there for a purpose, in order to not seem like conspiracy theories or something. But all this, what it says in there, can be proven.
What about your interpretation of what some people say? You know, Muslims were responsible for the European Enlightenment.
The Renaissance, without a doubt.
Renaissance.
Absolutely. There are even historians who say actually the Muslims in Italy played a much bigger role for the development of history in the Renaissance than the ones in Spain, right? Because Renaissance actually was mainly, it came from Italy. It was an Italian enlightening actually, and it was not from Spain. So the Muslims in Italy, in Sicily especially, and if you look at the Normans, the Norman king, the first one, Roger, who came down to Sicily, who loved and admired Arabic and Islamic culture, and he himself spoke Arabic better than he spoke any other language. They themselves actually took gladly everything over from the Muslims. He would wash himself very often, by the way, which the church didn't like. Yeah, so that's why they are, again, Italian historians.
The half of Iman.
The Italian historians, Muslim historians, to say now he might have been a Muslim. You know, he was washing so many times. He was seen so many times washing. It's like making wudu, basically.
About 5 times a day.
Most probably, imagine. So these things are extremely important that have to be mentioned. Just simply are there.
It's only the kind of the modern period that this history of the kind of embeddedness of Islam in what is known as Europe now has been kind of systematically deleted and removed, and
of course
this is what you're trying to.
One other thing, for example, have you ever heard of the troubadours? I mean, the people who grew up in my time in Germany, we grew up with comics, Asterix and Obelix. You guys here in the Anglo-Saxon world, you don't really.
I remember Asterix.
You do remember Asterix and Obelix? Well,
I saw it in a museum.
Asterix and Obelix. There was Troubadours. There was in their village. There was a guy who was singing. Right, he had a harp and he was singing. Troubadours, his name. So he was a troubadour. And what is a troubadour? They came from the south of France, where the Muslims had established Fraxinetum, which was a Muslim establishment. And poetry, as we all know, before Islam, poetry was already something that the Arabs had before Islam. And they brought poetry over to France. And from there, it became something that was suddenly a French and European culture and became what is nowadays music, basically, and songs and so on. So that, again, is not a conspiracy thing. It's just simply, if you look at the development chronologically, you will see that there was no poetry. Poetry as we know it from the troubadours did not exist before the Muslims were there. It existed after them. So it's no coincidence, right?
So you're welcome.
That's it.
On behalf of all Muslims. The Woking Mosque.
The Woking Mosque, the first purpose-built mosque. But it was not the first mosque in Britain. You know that, right? Because Abdullah Quilliam William, who was the first British Muslim. Quilliam William, not the foundation. No, not the foundation. Abdullah Quilliam William, he was a lawyer, a white lawyer, Englishman from Liverpool.
He was bestowed the title of Shaykh al-Islam of the British Isles.
Absolutely true, from the Ottoman Empire. Absolutely true.
Ottoman Empire.
Exactly.
So the Quilliam Foundation would probably regard him as an extremist or something.
I don't know what they would do either.
Going to melt
most
down.
Probably.
I need to change the name.
he set up in his mansion, which you can still go and visit it in Liverpool, by the way, mashallah. We have some ideas of taking school classes there as well, by the way, which I think is a great thing. Just take your children there, go and visit the mansion of Abdullah Quillan William, which is still there, and you can go and pray in the oldest mosque in this country.
In Liverpool.
In Liverpool, his mansion.
Oh, there you have it, folks. The oldest mosque in Liverpool, in the country is in Liverpool.
Yes.
So all those Muslim Liverpool supporters, you finally have a good reason now to
support Liverpool. Yes.
Mashallah, to what do you call it? Justify your support of.
Yeah, and I mean, and these are just small, we're just talking about small issues here. If you go deeper into there's so much to go
like
into,
washing
into
your
depth. Like washing hands, for example, exactly, or like how many Englishmen has actually had studied in Al-Andalus and came back with his knowledge to the British Isles. And this is his mention, by the way. I mean, that used to be
this is properly researched and corroborated stuff.
We're talking about more than 20 years.
Yeah, because you get those text messages and email forwards.
Yeah.
The Queen was actually a Muslim, or I mean,
no,
Shakespeare was Sheikh Zubair.
Sheikh Zubair, yeah. We have none of this stuff is there.
Okay,
none of this stuff. There are sources at the end, so you
where
can
can
find
people get this? Can you
this one
plug
anybody
your Mahmoud Mansour high five?
Yeah.
If you can reach. Oh, he's saying it's 5 minutes left.
Okay. And the one or the other.
Film's going to run out. Where can people find out more about you?
On our website, stefkeris.com. Very simple, stefkeris.com.
There you
so
go.
they can buy the books there. They're in English and German available.
English and German?
And German as well, yes.
Yeah. Your social media credentials, we'll put them in the old...
Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, the typical ones. These books are the first ones. This is a gift for you today, for the crew as well.
This is a gift.
And this is about the Ottoman Empire.
I didn't get you anything.
For the people who are interested in Ertugrul and Ottoman Empire, there you go. This is something about Ottoman Greece, Vienna and Hungary.
I like this thing of our guests bringing us gifts.
Why not? Yes.
We should, if you're ever a guest on the Islam 360's Unscripted Podcast, then take note. This is how you be a gracious guest, inshallah. Not like us being far from gracious hosts. We didn't get you anything, but I'm sure there's something lying around.
I got some water.
I mean, there's a surprise lurking behind the...
Get something. Can't wait for it, yeah? Before I leave, I shouldn't forget it.
So sorry, I interrupted you. This is what got you into...
This is what got me into Islam, basically. The Ottoman Greece, the Ottoman history of Greece, yeah. They all come as well
Vienna.
With DVDs. So because they were too expensive, I did not give them to you. Okay. So you would have to buy them separately.
What are DVDs for our younger...
For the younger audience? Yeah. Okay, these are the things, the round ones you put in the DVD play and then you... can watch something, okay? They still exist. Come on,
that's what DJs do the scratches on. The Unknown Ottoman Hungary and the Forgotten Ottoman Legacy of Mainland Greece.
Absolutely.
Mainland Greece, not
Greece,
just
not the islands.
So mainland Greece was colonized by the savage barbarian Muslim invaders.
Bloodthirsty Turks. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
There you have it, folks. I think we've lost track of time. I'd like to continue the conversation, but I don't want to make you miss your train back to sunny old Birmingham, since they finally let you back in after the whole toilet experiment. But Jazakallah khair, Dr. Stef Keris. I feel like I want to say it in a more exotic way.
Well, you can say my whole name, Stef Keris.
Stef Keris.
Yes. This is my.
I should have started with that. Assalamu alaikum. Today's podcast. We'll add it later. Stef Keris. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair at home for watching. If you like this podcast, give a like and a share. It helps with the old algorithms. We're available on all the podcast platforms now, I think. iTunes, Spotify, Google, etc. Let us know your comments, your ideas for future episodes as well in the comments. And what was I going to say? Yeah, if you made it to the end of the podcast, then mashallah, you're a pretty sick guy or lady. And see you on the next one. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. If you're ever in East London around Brick Lane, make sure you drop by Quaker Street Coffee and Bubble Tea for some wonderful tea and coffee. Quote the Islam 21C Unscripted Podcast and you'll get 10% off.